All right, welcome to this episode of the It'll Buff Podcast. I'm your host, CEO, and founder of Five and Fly, Daniel Grochowski, and today we are launching a new series, and I could not be more excited to have the pilot of this series, if you will, a man that is on my team, has been on my team since I was at the academy and struggling through my kicking career. But we'll dive in and we'll introduce him. So today I have with me Dr. Nate Zinsser, performance psychology consultant and author, and former director of the performance psychology program at the United States military. And just if that's not enough of an introduction, let's just cover a few things that this man has accomplished. He developed the original curriculum for mental toughness training throughout the Army, mentored dozens of NCAA All-American athletes. I was not an All-American athlete, but I was an NCAA athlete. I was one of those guys. 10 Olympic team members, 4 Olympic medalists, 2 NHL All-Stars, and Eli Manning, 2 times Super Bowl champion, MVP. Doc Z, as I refer to him, thanks for coming on. Please introduce yourself if I missed anything, and we'll dive right into this.
Good morning, one and all. Good morning, Dan Grochowski, alias Grouch. I will refer to you by that nickname forever. It is a treat to be on your podcast, and I look forward to a wonderful conversation, sharing all kinds of neat stuff with your listeners. Let's rock.
Awesome. Doc, thanks so much. Now, one thing that I mentioned, and the reason why, this isn't just the only reason, one of the many reasons why I wanted to sit down and have Doc come on to this podcast is he released a book, The Confident Mind. If you haven't read it, stop what you're doing, go on Audible, use one of your tokens, download it, listen to it, then come back to this episode because we're going to dive into that. But I was listening to The Confident Mind as I was in my corporate career and just kind of struggling through some personal things in my life of you dive into the corporate career and you want to achieve success, but then you're handed the keys to unlocking some of this stuff and you forget about, am I good enough to do this? And one thing that I was reflecting upon is we going all the way back. I think it was circa 2013 when I got introduced to Doc Z in the egg chair. And we just sat down, and as we were reflecting before we hopped onto this podcast of just the nutcase that I was as a kicker and how much that impacted, just this relationship. And Doc, so I want to start there, right? So your background and all the things that you accomplished and that you continue to do, and all the people in your book, right? There's just hundreds of people that you've had the opportunity to work with, and what are some things before we dive into your book that that I think are for those veterans that are out there that are even in the military, that are transitioning out of the military, or that are in the corporate world. What are some things that as you reflect that you feel that really help those individuals be successful?
Sure. Great question to start with. What helps someone be successful in whatever career or sport or passion they have is an underlying sense of certainty that they've got enough skill, enough knowledge, enough ability to execute pretty much anywhere. Whether it's, I got to go on the stage at Carnegie Hall, or I am going into a job interview with the CEO of this company that I'm really excited about, or I'm trying out for a team, or, oh my gosh, I'm stepping out onto the turf at Lincoln Federal Field in Philadelphia to attempt a potentially game-winning field goal in the Army-Navy football game, which is about as hyped up as anything gets. That underlying sense of certainty is very important. It is very fragile. It's very topical, situation, skill specific. So it's not something that you can just take for granted. If you take it for granted, well, you run some risks. That's the bad news. The good news is that you can work on that sense of certainty. And that's why I took the 5 years to produce the book. to help people understand what the sense of certainty is, how you can build it up, how you can protect it when the crap hits the fan, which happens almost daily, and then how you can bring that sense of certainty to your moment, whether it's that potentially game-winning field goal or that job interview or that performance on the stage, whatever it is. And I will say this, I'm so glad that Dan Grachowski is listening to my book on Audible. All right. I'm gonna say this, however. Buy the damn hard copy.
I knew that was going to come. I knew that was coming.
And so that it's not that I'm grubbing for, another book sale, ladies and gentlemen. What I am emphasizing, however, is that if you have the hard copy, you can make notes in the margin, and you can underline things, and you can dog-ear pages, and you can hang out with the material in the book to a different degree than you can when you're listening to it in the car, while you're running, on the stationary bike, or whatever. So yeah, get the book in whatever format can work for you. So there we go, Grouch.
Oh, Doug, as always, just politely calling me out, and no, it's interesting that you bring that point up, because to your point, I've been listening to the Audible, and I'm like, I'll be sitting there listening to it, whether I'm sitting at my desk, just kind of having some meditation time or just reflecting, and I'm like, oh, that's a great point. I need to, and it's like, well, Grouch, if you just bought the book, you could just highlight that and then right next to it as you read it. And so there you go, listeners. I'm going to go, for immediately following this podcast recording, I'm going to go purchase the book and dive into it and mark it up. Now, so this idea of underlying sense of certainty, I think, you alluded to a particular event that I'm pretty sure we walked through at least 100 times as I sat in the egg chair and hoped one day we even went back and I remember we played the video. I forget the kicker that he kicked a game-winning field goal, flag, I think it was either offsides, delay a game or something, made it, right? Crowd's going wild, kick gets called back, and he has to go kick it again. And I think we rehearsed that several times. Again, I would say at least 100. And again, before we just dive into everything, that underlying sense of certainty and developing it, I think as we look into that and create it, what are just some real quick, and like I said, we're going to dive into it, but I think just on that topic before we dive into it, what are some quick tips and tricks for people to just kind of think through and practice on a daily basis to help them with that? Again, this isn't just, right, this is for everybody. This isn't just for the professional athlete, those thinking to go to the Olympics, go into combat and prepare. This is for everybody. So what would you say a few of those things are?
I would say the first and simplest thing is just to do a little daily reflection about your life. Do a little daily reflection. And I use the code letters ESP for this. Every day, you probably invested some quality effort. That's the E. So take a minute and jot down, either in a notes app or on a piece of paper, where did I invest quality effort today? Where did I maybe push through a little procrastination? Maybe where did I do something that, God, I wasn't fired up about doing it, but I knew it had to get done, and I did it. You sending out one more letter, making that phone call, working through the queue of stuff in your email inbox. Just reflect on an episode or two from the day of quality effort. That's the E. Next comes the S. S stands for success. What little successes did you achieve in this day? Small successes. Yeah, you probably didn't win the Nobel Prize or the World Series, but did you establish contact with somebody? Did you improve your relationship with somebody else? Did you succeed at a task that you have been working toward? Make a note of an episode of success. And then P stands for progress. based on your effort, based on your little successes, what are the things that you're getting better at? Are you getting better at networking? Are you getting better at using a particular software application? Are you getting better at understanding the nuances of the run pass option if you're a football quarterback? Are you getting a little bit better at keeping your head down when you're trying to hit the golf ball or kick that stupid oblate spheroid from the holder in order to get it through the goalposts 40 yards downrange?
Yeah.
What are you making progress with? ESP, daily ESP, that's just an exercise that you use to build up this inner sense of certainty about yourself. You've got to look for evidence to back up the sense of certainty, rather than just think happy thoughts, oh, I'm great, da, 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 da. How about looking for evidence? How about being honest with yourself? And when I say honest, please do look at your effort and your successes and your progress with at least as much, if not far more, enthusiasm and energy that you tend to reflect upon your setbacks and your difficulties and your troubles. Because we have a certain negativity bias about us. Oh yeah, we can get far more wrapped around the axle with a setback as opposed to a success, with a problem as opposed to progress. So you really got to you got to have a sort of a tight mind about that. I use the analogy of a filter. You got to let certain things in, you got to keep certain things out. That's a super important confidence building skill. And then in terms of sort of preparing yourself for that potential game-winning field goal or that potential interview performance, whatever it is, I mean, you really got to kind of put yourself in that setting, and you got to ask yourself honestly, okay, what are the things that could really get me uptight, worried, nervous, dysfunctional in that setting? Okay, I refer to these as flat tires. Okay, you're in the middle of a performance and something happens. It's kind of like driving your car down the road and you got a flat tire. You got to stop. You got to take care of things. You got to fix it. You got to get back on the road quick. You don't have time to wait around for AAA to come with the tow truck and do it for you. You got to do it yourself. Okay. And if you've never changed the flat tire in that particular car, it's going to take you a long time because you got to pull out the owner's manual and pull out all the tools and learn how to do it and da-da-da-da-da-da, as opposed to, I rehearsed this. I know that this could happen. I'm prepared for it. I know that if I miss this certain cue at this part of my musical performance, I know how to get right back in it. If I happen to have missed my first field goal attempt in this pressure-laden arena, I know that I can take a breath, step back, release it, and think about how many field goals I've made before and basically be my own best friend and my own biggest fan at that moment when I might be tempted to turn into my harshest critic. Now, Grouch told the story of a famous victory of the Army football team over Navy. This is December 1992. The young kicker's name was Pat Malcolm. He did indeed kick a 44-yarder, closing seconds of the game. Beautiful kick, but there was a delay of game penalty. And so he had to kick it again from 49 yards, which he did. Army wins. All is right with the world. Unless you're a Naval Academy grad. Sorry, fellas. All right. But the thing is, Pat Malcolm had rehearsed. What if I do something great and then for reasons outside of my control, it goes south and I got to do it over again or I got to do it differently? Am I ready to accept that? Am I ready to be myself and not let those circumstances beyond my control? I'm giving a speech and the lights go out, or the AV system doesn't work, or the microphone kicks out, or there's a fire drill in the middle of the presentation. Am I ready to handle that? I have indeed given a presentation where the AV kicked out, and all of a sudden my carefully produced PowerPoint slideshow froze. Okay, I got to be ready for that. I got to be ready to continue with my program, to alter my delivery a little bit so that I'm still giving my clientele something of great value. So you gotta know who you are, all right? And you gotta know the situation that you're getting into. And you gotta be able to say, okay, I know what I got. I know where I'm going. I'm enough. What I got matches the demands of the situation. I'm enough. And if I could leave you, everybody listening, with just that one principle to follow. You don't have to walk into a performance saying, I'm the greatest that ever was. But you got to walk into that performance, whatever it is, thinking, I'm enough for this moment. I am enough for this moment.
Doc, that was awesome, and we're gonna dive even more into that as we continue to go through this podcast episode. And all the listeners out there, Doc and I were kind of discussing this before hopping on this episode, and you guys heard my story in episode 1, the pilot, what I really struggled through, as I transitioned out of the military, and I forgot all of my training that I walked through with Doc. And, it's funny as I reflect and I watch, I sit and I reflect and I watch Army, Navy football games, Army football games, and I watch them with my family. One of these things that we'll dive into is one of these skills that Doc and I practice. I mean, we probably spent, I don't know, hundreds of hours practicing this skill. And it is the visualization and breathing aspect, right? Of creating a repeatable process that you don't necessarily have to physically do, but mentally, how do you prepare yourself to enter into an arena? And that's one of the things we're going to talk about. But one of these things that, for me, my family, obviously watching football games, and we watch kickers now, and everybody holds their breath, and my wife still gets kind of worked up. She's like, I used to have like mini heart palpitations when you went out for a kick, but it was crazy. I didn't miss too many field goals, but when I missed field goals, my entire family knew, because they knew me, they knew I was going to miss a field goal. And here's why: because I did not walk through the practice and the technique that Doc and I worked through of, hey, because it comes down to remembering the baseline. Remember, you're in this crazy area and you're thinking, and we practice it. It was 3 steps back. I still remember it. 3 steps back, look up, look down, take a deep breath, 2 steps to the left, look up, look down, take a deep breath, nod my head at the kicker or at the holder, snap, boom, kick, go. And if I did those things, I didn't miss. I mean, I could go back and watch film and I didn't miss. It was whether I missed my breath on the 3 steps back or I missed my breath on the 2 steps to the side. It was my parents, they're like, he's going to miss it. He's going to miss it. And, and that was just the case. And so all these things of just repeating these things and what I was doing in that moment of breath, of breathing, was telling myself, I have the skills to put this weird shaped brown ball through 2 yellow poles 45 yards away. And that's just what I had to tell myself and believe in. And so we figured that out. And, I was a starting freshman kicker at West Point, right? One of the few to do it, to kick all 4 years. And, towards the end of the season, I got benched, whether it was due to just poor kicking or whatever. And then I fell to the bottom of the depth chart, to the point where Coach Ellerson looked at me and said, hey, you gotta figure something out over the summer. You might, be riding the bench or might not be playing. And that's when Doc and I linked up, and I ended up developing these skills to help me earn that starting spot again. And so, Doc, I'm eternally grateful because I got to enjoy four years of collegiate football, playing in some awesome arenas, some awesome games. People always ask me, like, why, did you ever want to go pro? And I was like, no. College for me was so much. I just am so thankful for that experience, and you played a very large role in that. Now, as I mentioned, guys, Doc wrote an awesome book. It's like the greatest mastermind book that I think I've read in a long time. And as I was reading it, and I need to go back and highlight, there was really 3 chapters that stood out to me that I feel have some of the greatest impact for officers who are in the military looking to transition out into the corporate world. And for me, and Doc, again, feel free to, we can take this wherever you want. But those three chapters that I felt were very, very important was these three: constructive thinking in the present, envisioning your ideal future, and then entering into the arena. Those for me, as I listened to the Confident Mind, those are the three chapters that stood out to me the most. And as I was listening to them, and I will go back and read them, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember covering those things. I remember thinking about those things. And, again, I forgot about it while I was in my corporate arena. But let's start with constructing a constructive thinking in the present. Or yes, constructive thinking in the present, and I feel like we kind of walked through that with this ESP process, but I think maybe let's dive into that a little bit deeper, especially as officers are sitting there thinking to themselves, okay, I want to leave the military, right? What do I need to do right now to help prepare myself mentally for that journey, because it is a journey.
Gotcha. Yeah. Constructive thinking in the present. That's basically looking at all the different stories that you tell yourself about yourself. I'm this, I'm that, I'm good at that, I'm really smart when it comes to this, I don't know spit about this other thing. We all have these stories that we tell ourselves. Our minds are full of opinions, beliefs, and when you think about it, those beliefs about ourselves, those stories we tell ourselves, they basically become predictions about how we're going to be. Okay, I am this way. This is what's going to happen. And because you have a belief about yourself, you tend to act in a certain way. And when you act in a certain way, you achieve certain results. And if your actions are predicated on your previous beliefs, then the results of those actions are going to be mere confirmations or outward expressions of what you're thinking about initially. Moral of the story? You got to think about what you want as if you already have it, even if you don't at the moment. How do I want to be? What do I want to have? How do I want to act? Can I start telling myself stories about those things in the present tense? Okay? It's helpful to start out and, really be honest with yourself about, well, what are you indeed good at? What beliefs do you have about yourself that are rather constructive? When I work with people, we come up with a big list, okay? And anyone who's been an officer in the military and who is looking to transition out has a whole slew of competencies. I know this. I know about this kind of organization. I have handled dozens of subordinates, hundreds of subordinates, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars worth of equipment. I know about this form of logistics. I know about this form of leadership. I know about this technology. Okay? I am, I have, I do, I make, it is. Those statements about yourself are really important. And then you can look at, okay, now how do I want to be? Well, I want to learn this software suite. I want to learn this industry. I want to learn this this competency, whatever it is. How about expressing that in the present tense? I am expert at this. I make progress in this every day. When you talk to yourself about yourself in the present tense, what you do is establish a psychological bar that you tend to live up to. And you're either going to you're going to express that as a psychological bar and live up to it, or you're going to express some lower bar about yourself, and you tend to live up to that one. Take your pick, people. It's not rocket science. It's just the way the human mind works. This is the simple fact of the self-fulfilling prophecy. You have an idea, a belief, a prophecy. It's going to be this way. You act in a certain way to fulfill that. We all do it. We all have opinions. It's just a question of whether those opinions and beliefs are constructive in terms of helping us move forward in our lives. Okay, now that leads to the next chapter that Grouch was referring to. Constructive thinking in the future, thinking about the future that you want. Okay, there's an interesting fact in that your significant parts of your nervous system really don't know the difference between something that you actually experience and something that you vividly imagine experiencing. Okay? When you wake up from a nightmare, which is an imagined experience, your heart pounds and your muscles are twitching and you're sweating and you're clutching as if you are actually in a dangerous, physically challenging, perhaps even life-threatening encounter. Or maybe you're just dreaming about walking buck naked down the hallways of your high school. I don't know what it is, but it tends to produce a physical response. You fooled your nervous system. The image of doing whatever inaugurated a whole series of nervous system changes that communicated to your heart and to your muscles, etc., etc. You fooled your nervous system. Well, how about fooling your nervous system into experiencing a version of the development and the success that you ultimately want? Okay? Getting that job, acing that interview. Here's how I want it to go. And really trying to set yourself. It's going to take place in this building, in this room, with these people. I'll be asked these kinds of questions. I'm ready to tell a cool story about this and about that. And so you war game out, this is how I want to be. And you try to make it as full a sensory experience as possible. Can I see what it's going to be like? The room, the colors, the lighting, what I'm wearing, what the other people are wearing. Can I hear their voices, background hum of an air conditioner or this, whatever the setting is? Can I feel myself in a chair, leaning forward, projecting the right kind of energy and enthusiasm? Can I see what I'm going to see, hear what I'm going to hear, feel what I'm going to feel? And I want to rehearse that. And this is what Grouch and I did in my office at West Point pretty much before every game. What's the stadium? What's it look like? Sometimes we could get pictures. Sometimes we had to just imagine it. What's it going to look like? What are you going to feel like trotting out from, the Army sideline? Okay, it's 4th and 2 from the 30-yard line, the left hash. It's a cloudy day. There's wind coming off the reservoir from our right to our left. Let's set the scene. Let's go through the routine that he mentioned, and let's nail the damn thing. And it's that kind of routine process of envisioning what you want. Don't just see it, but hear it and feel it and smell it and taste it in as many senses as possible. That's why I use the term envisioning. And you want to do this from what I refer to in the book as a GoPro perspective. Mm. You're looking out your own eyes rather than watching yourself do it from a distance, from an outside perspective, as if you were watching yourself on film. No. If I'm envisioning my performance at Carnegie Hall, I'm standing backstage, man. I'm seeing the lights, and I'm walking out on that stage, and I'm seeing the floodlights and footlights in front of me, and there's this black maze out there, and slowly my vision takes in the faces, and I can see the various tiers of seating, and I can feel my instrument in my hand, and I could hear the cue from, my bandmates or a conductor, or maybe it's all up to me. I'm a solo performer. But I'm doing it so that when I get there, physically get there, well, I've already kind of had the experience of doing it. It's like, okay, I'm kind of comfortable. I'll still be excited, but I will have fooled my nervous system often enough so that my nervous system is kind of comfortable in this new, potentially threatening environment. So that's a way of preparing oneself. Now, when we actually get to that arena, entering your arena with confidence, you've told yourself the right stories, you've envisioned your performance. Man, entering that arena, and this goes back to something we mentioned previously, you got to make a decision. You got to enter your arena, having gone from a person who is working to develop themselves, working to get better. I gotta work and practice and become the best in the world. Now when it's time to enter the arena, you're not thinking about becoming better. You're thinking about being the best that you are. Being the best that you are in that moment. So it goes back to that decision. I'm enough. I know what the challenge is. I got to convince this board of directors that my proposal is going to make the company a ton of money. Or I've got to convince this skeptical and worried patient that the surgical procedure that I can perform is going to make a big difference in her life. I've got to bring my best stuff. I am enough. I'm going from a workhorse mentality where I try to get better and try to get better. Now I'm a racehorse. Now I'm just up in the gate, getting ready to go. The Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu put it this way: if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will be safe in 100 battles. If you don't know yourself, but you know your enemy, 50-50 chance. If you don't know yourself and you don't know your enemy, you will always be in peril. Who am I? What do I got? What are my strengths? What have I improved in? What are the demands of the situation? The arena, the task to be performed, the various flat tires that I've considered already and have worked through. And now I make the decision that I'm enough, okay? I'm rich enough. I can walk into that auto dealership and buy the car that I want because I got enough money, I know what I want, and I'm not going to listen to some sales jerk mess me around because I know what I want and I know I've got the requisite skill to deliver it. I could go on for hours and hours, Grouch. You know that.
Oh, I know. I'm so appreciative of you just walking through that. I think, man, I'm flashing back, to West Point and just sitting in the A chair, and boy, do I really miss those times. I think, go ahead.
It's possible, anybody entering the arena can kind of prepare themselves for that, that moment, basically a pregame routine, and your pregame routine takes place if you're walking into your building every day to work. Okay, here I am. I'm walking through this portal. Now I am this guy, this gal, this person, this professional. Okay, I make sure that I'm bringing everything with me, and then for each and every little mini performance throughout the day, I start with a little bit of a pre-shot routine, almost similar to what you were describing about every time you came out onto the field to attempt to kick. Okay, I got to think confidently. I got to have a good thought about myself. I've got to take that breath and relax my body, and then I got to put my eyes and put my senses where they belong. Confident thought, breathe into the body, attach your awareness. Confident thought, breathe your body, attach your awareness. C for confident thought, B for breathe into the body, A for attach your awareness, CBA, Charlie, Bravo, Alpha. That's all you got to remember.
Charlie, Bravo. So there you go, guys. That's it. Charlie, Bravo, Alpha, and then you're good to go. No, there's just so much that we just walked through that. Again, I can't even express to you guys how important this stuff is. And I mean, I don't usually like to talk about my own accolades. I'm very proud of my accolades, and I am very thankful for the opportunities that I had, but I don't want to have that shape what people think about me. I want my actions presently to shape what people think about me. And, quite frankly, I was one of the things that I have to walk through as a aspiring CEO, entrepreneur, if you will, of starting this company, helping officers transition out of the military, is to remember these things, right? For me, creating the constructive present thinking of this thing is that, hey, the value that I am providing to these people is very important, right? I might not necessarily be the resident expert, but the value that I'm giving you guys is important because they're personal experiences that I've gone through and that I have had other people work through and talk through, right? And then my future is I want to create a community of veterans who are helping officers transition out of the military. That's what I want to create. And I have to, and it goes back to setting that bar. And I want to set something so high that what I'm trying to do at Five and Fly is people are going to think it's crazy. And that's what I want. I think sometimes I can get my own way on that. And then enter the arena. Well, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just doing it every day. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about, okay, it's game time. Here's what I've practiced. Here's what I rehearsed. Here's my bar. Here's what I know. Here's how I go execute. And to all those people out there, that are listening to this, that's as your CEO of a company that's trying to create something and grow something that's going to be extremely valuable and useful in your life, not only now but in the future. That's what's going through my mind on a daily basis. So, Doc, I thank you so much for diving into that. I mean, I like I said, I could sit down and listen to you for hours and hours. Like I said, infinite wisdom. I know we kicked it off. Infinite wisdom that I'm so.
Oh, you're making me blush.
Oh man. Oh no, it's so, Doc. I think one thing, so we just covered again. The reason why I picked those few chapters is because I think it's those are the reoccurring themes that happen, in the day-to-day basis. Now, part of what I'm doing at Five and Fly is really helping officers transition out of the military, right? So these junior captains, senior captains transition out of the military into the corporate world. And as I was thinking to myself, and as I experienced myself, right, sometimes you get into these predicaments in the corporate world where you kind of succumb to the pressure in an organization of, even though you are providing immense value, you might feel as though you're not doing such. And that begins to cause somebody to reflect upon, hey, am I valuable enough? And it's like you created this foundation, right? You've had the constructive present thinking. You have the future, envisioning constructing the future that you want, and then you're in the arena, right? And so there's also those people that are in the professional world right now who are going through that, right? They saw this career path, they envision this future, and it's just not going the way that they thought it was going to go. And so taking on that, as officer that's in the corporate world experiencing that, what are a few things that would be, and I know you have more than a few things, but what are just a few things for the listeners out there to just kind of be reflecting upon and building these skills that are similar to what we've kind of walked through for that officers that's seeking to transition out of the military?
Sure. I think at this point we really got to look at how you respond to inevitable setbacks, difficulties, punches in the stomach that life will give you. No matter how optimistic and confident you may be, well, let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, shit happens, right? There will be setbacks. You will make mistakes. Your coworkers will make mistakes. Everybody is fallible and human. Even the godlike CEOs of various companies who seem to be invincible, they're going to mess things up, and it's going to trickle down and mess you up. You've got to be very good at responding mentally and emotionally to setbacks, mistakes, difficulties. All right? That's sort of that's the other half of the mental filter that you got to have. You got to let certain things in to build up your certainty, but you got to be able to respond to inadequacies and mistakes and setbacks constructively. And I'll give you just 3 ideas about it quickly. When a mistake happens, you have a choice to think about it in sort of permanent terms or temporary terms. I suggest you think about your setbacks as temporary. Yeah, they happened, but it was just that particular time. It was just that particular time. If you don't look at the setbacks as temporary, then by definition, you're kind of thinking, oh, here we go again. It's gonna keep happening. Even if a setback has occurred twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, you got to be mentally tough enough to think, okay, it was that particular time, as opposed to always. This is a shift in perspective that's important. That's takeaway number 1. Number 2, look at those same mistakes, setbacks, difficulties as limited in terms of where they occurred, localized. Yeah, it happened, but it happened in that meeting, in that room, at that time, in that place. It's limited to there. As opposed to, oh, this crap happens everywhere. All right? You've got to think of it in terms of being limited as opposed to being sort of global or universal. If you don't see it as occurring in one particular place, you inadvertently start thinking, oh, it happens everywhere. And now my whole game, my whole skill set is under question. That's number 2. Number 3, maybe the most important, usually the most difficult, is to look at those mistakes that you may indeed be responsible for, because you're human. Yeah, you goofed. But you got to look at them as non-representative of who you are and what you bring. Okay? You got to separate your sense of who you are from those particular mistakes. Yeah, they happened. Yeah, there are consequences. Yeah, it means you got to pull up your socks and get back in it again and maybe work at something, but it's not representative. Okay? If you don't take that perspective, by definition, you open the door to a huge screaming chorus of self-doubt. Maybe I'm not good enough for this gig. So you got to keep those mistakes temporary, limited, non-representative. T, temporary, L, limited, N, non-representative, or just simply not the truth. TLN. I've had guys wrap their lacrosse gloves, hockey sticks with tape, and they take a big Sharpie before every game, TLN, just to remind themselves that when they get out there and they miss a pass, or they miss a shot, or they commit a foul, it's temporary, it's limited, it's not the truth. That helps them stay up in the arena.
That's a good word. That's a great word. To all the listeners out there, that's so true. That's so true. I mean, and Doc knows it, and I know it. But if you haven't heard that before, that's so true, because everything it comes and goes, and that's just, honestly, that's just kind of life in a way too. It's temporary. It's limited in that sphere, and it's not the truth to who you are. If you understand, right? If you kind of walk through these previous things of constructing all these things about yourself, right? And you realize, okay, this one instance, that is not the truth. And I think, It's like this is a great reminder for me of just as I sit down and reflect upon everything that I've encountered and I've walked through. Right, it's all those things are temporary, they're limited, and they're not the truth. And Doc, I thank you so much for that reminder for me as well. Like I said, I always say this in every podcast episode. I was like, even I am so thankful to have these conversations with people because I just love listening to people and have them share their wisdom and knowledge. And I'm learning a lot, and I know that the listeners are gonna learn a lot as well. I'm excited to get this episode out there. One thing, Doc, as we kind of start to land this plane, one thing that I ask guests on this podcast is, right, as Army officers, I ask them, what is their why for getting out of the Army? And I think covering what we walked through today, and one of the things is I seek to help other people transition out of the Army is I don't think that they will have a successful transition if they don't know what their why is for getting out of the military. And I tell them, their why, it can't be money, it can't be salary, it can't be a job, and it can't be a company. It's got to be something that's tangible, but that is going to be something that they can point their action to. And I shake your head, and I would love some insight into that.
If a man has a strong enough why, he can tolerate or she can tolerate any how do I do it. If you understand why you need to do it, the how stuff, the details, the nitty-gritty of accomplishing it kind of falls into place. And I love what you said, that it can't just be about money. It can't just be about a certain job. It can't be about a certain company. It's got to be something deeper than that. What is it about this job that excites you? Is it, I'm really interested in this kind of technology, or I'm really interested in seeing what this company might be able to provide. Medical equipment sales. Okay, yeah, there are a lot of people who sell medical equipment. But the most successful people who sell medical equipment, and I know this because I've given keynotes at medical sales equipment corporate meetings, the people who sell big don't just do it, because I want to make X dollars. They do it because they really believe that the surgical equipment, the home remedy equipment, the cardiac monitoring equipment, they really have a sense that it's making people's lives better. There's something deeper than just what kind of paycheck and what kind of bonus you might get. Not that having a good paycheck and a nice fat bonus is a bad thing. I'm not saying that. But it's not enough, okay? It's not gonna make you happy for very long. You could do it, but then you'd have the same sense of, I don't know, this isn't very fulfilling, that you've had before. What fulfills you? What pulls you forward? Some guys get out of the military and, they want to be high school wrestling coaches because wrestling just grabs them, and they feel that in the crucible of the wrestling experience, young boys and young girls these days, let's hear it for women's wrestling.
Yeah.
Young boys and young girls learn stuff that's helpful, The great Dan Gable, the famous wrestler and coach, who endorsed my book, by the way, he said, once you've wrestled, everything else is easy. And there's a certain truth to that. Because there are things that you can learn in that crucible. And if providing that, being part of that is something that brings you great satisfaction, well, damn it, you got a great why. So it's really looking at what matters to me. How do I want to be remembered 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now? You're going to be remembered. It's just a question of what for. How do you want to be remembered? I want to be remembered as a person who left a positive stamp here, positive stamp there. I want to be somebody who took a concept and made it part of a business. I want to take a business and make it part of reality, So getting down to that, taking as much time as is necessary, talking to as many people as is necessary, so till you find that, what really fulfills you, that's a That's an absolute essential to making this kind of transition, Grouch.
I appreciate the words of, the words of encouragement there. Like I said, I'm trying to do this. It's funny you mentioned medical sales. I don't know. Did you ever work with Chris Carnegie on the football team?
Chris Carnegie. Yeah, I remember Chris. He was a defensive back, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he actually went into medical sales for that same exact reason, to where, he's just like, yeah, I never would have thought in a million years that I wanted to go on medical sales. But he's like, I've experienced a lot of injuries, and I understand like what modern technology in the medical field can provide. And so this opportunity opened up, and I, went after it. And it was just really cool to kind of listen to him talk through that. So, Doc, the question's coming at you. I know you're not transitioning out of the military, and I know you've been doing what you've been doing for a long time. But the question to you, Doc, is why did you step into this field? What makes you so passionate about what you're doing and what you're providing, and just life-changing results to people?
Well, the reason why I got into this field 40-something years ago was because how obvious it became to me that mindset, confidence, focus, composure made such a huge difference in human performance across the board. It was very obvious to me back as a high school athlete. Man, those expectations you have about yourself, they really matter, And then all the way through my undergraduate career, all the way through, I coached high school for a while. It just became so obvious that unless you get your head screwed on right, a lot of the work that you put in the weight room, on the practice field, in the film room, is going to have only a marginal effect, because it's like putting your foot on the gas pedal and putting your foot on the brake at the same time. You'll make a lot of noise and you'll burn a lot of calories. But you won't get very far. So that's why I got into it. And the reason why I'm still doing it at age 68 is because I see such a need, such an interest. People contacting me all the time. Police officers, surgeons, startup CEOs, athletes in every sport from axe throwing to wrestling. I don't have a Z yet. Can't think of a sport that begins with Z, but I got A to W and pretty much everything in between. There's such a need, and if I can help somebody feel good about themselves while they're doing the most important thing in their personal universe, I can go to bed happy. And I do.
That's awesome. That's so great. Thanks for sharing that, Doc. Now, folks, as we close this episode, Doc, if there's people out there listening to this episode and, they're like, man, I would love to sit down and just pick Doc's brain, spend some time with you. I know you're a busy man, but how would somebody go about getting in contact with you? What does that look like? Is that a possibility?
I've got a very simple website through which people can contact me. Nate.Zinsser.com. I kept it simple. I'm out there. I'll get your message, people. I'll do my level damnedest to get back to you in a timely manner.
Awesome. Great, Doc. And guys, he really does. I mean, he's a busy man, and he's kind enough to come on this podcast and spend an hour to a little bit longer with me on this podcast, and I'm eternally grateful, Doc, and I'm so thankful for that. But again, Doc, thanks for coming on. This has been such an amazing episode. I know this is going to provide exponential value. So guys, to the listeners out there, step number 1, I know I mentioned this back in like minute 5, but step number 1, if you haven't gotten the Confident Mind, purchase it, whether Audible or book. If you purchase the Audible, go purchase the book so you can highlight things, make the notes, and you can have it sitting on your desk as you go through it. I'm personally going to go buy the book, and I'm going to go out and take all these notes and again, continue to build these techniques and practice them as I go about my corporate career. Yeah, so this is episode 1 of just a new series. I was toying with the words of what they call this series, but I really think it's going to be along the lines of a mastermind with the master of the mind. That's just going to be these series that I'm going to provide, because really, guys, as you listen to this episode and as you find out, this is one of the most important things to master, right? Outside of just the physical and the spiritual realm is the mental realm. And if you aren't strong in between your ears, whether that's in sports, in the military, or in the corporate world, you are going to struggle. And so please just listen to this episode. Doc, do you have any other parting words you want to share before we close out this podcast?
I'm just appreciative of the opportunity to reconnect with you, Grouch, and I wish all the best to your listeners. Let's find out how good we all can be.
That's it. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning into this episode. And as we always close out and in life, remember, it'll buff.